It's Tuesday afternoon, 4 p.m. in Switzerland. It's Space Café WebTalk time. Our Space Café WebTalk 33 minutes with Professor Dr. Kai-Uwe Schrogl will begin soon. Thank you for joining us for this exciting event. We expect a pretty full house today, so you may want to submit your questions soon. We also expect a very informative audience for this event on space law for the future. We really appreciate your ongoing feedback. I'm Thorsten Kriening, your host today and co-publisher of SpaceWatch.Global. We are a Switzerland-based online platform for information in and about space and new space activities in a geopolitical context. I know many of you already know our website, our bi-weekly newsletter, our daily newsletters, our Space Café podcast. We just published episode 3 with Daniel Porras, and of course, our web talks. If you've missed any of our previous web talks, we have an archive available on our webpage in the event section. We host our Space Café web talks on a weekly basis. This is already the 9th edition. I hope you mark Tuesdays at the same time in your calendar. And our upcoming, bit of a spoiler, our upcoming lineup is just outstanding. And with that, today I'm very honored by a very special guest. He is at the forefront of space policy, space law, and international law. I'm very proud to welcome Professor Dr. Kai-Uwe Schrogl today. To introduce him by his CV will take up our entire time, so let me focus on just a few highlights. Professor Schrogl is currently seconded from the European Space Agency to the German Federal Ministry of Economic Affairs and Energy in Berlin to support the preparation of the German presidency of the Council of the European Union in the second half of 2020. This alone makes us grateful, as your calendar must be very full these days. Until last year, he was the Chief Strategy Officer of ESA. Before, he was the Director of the European Space Policy Institute in Vienna, the leading European think tank for space policy. Prior to this, he was the head of corporate development and external relations department in the German Aerospace Center. Previously, he also worked for the German Ministry of Post, or for Post and Telecommunication, and the German Space Agency DARA. He has been a delegate to numerous international forums, such as the United Nations Committee of the Peaceful Use of Outer Space and others. Kai-Uwe has written or co-edited 17 books and more than 140 articles. He also gave his perspective on the executive order of President Trump on space resources in SpaceWatch.Global last month. He will speak today in his role as president of the International Institute of Space Law. With that short introduction, I'm handing over to you, Kai-Uwe.
Thank you, Thorsten. And hello to everybody. It's great to be on your show, Thorsten. And I'm really happy to be able to provide you with some ideas and insights in space lawmaking. You have asked me to talk about space law for the future. But it cannot go without saying a few words on where we came from and where we stand. And this is certainly the good news, and I will come very, very quickly, I'm afraid, to the problems, which I will call challenges. Now, where we stand is not so bad. We have a development of space law for around 50 years, and we have seen a rather good way of establishing space law and further refining and developing space law amongst the world community. What is also important to note is that international space law has been providing a rather stable order for the conduct of space activities. And the principles of space law as they stand today, or have been standing since the establishment of the Outer Space Treaty in 1967, have been respected by the space actors. And I think this is really worth noting, because all over the place we see that states do not respect international law and international commitments, but we have to say in outer space, they have been abiding by the principles of international law, of space law. Very remarkable, and this should make us also quite confident and provide us with a rather positive attitude to the further development of space law. There is also one other point I should mention, and that is that for the past 50 plus, almost 60 years, the UN Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space has been a rather successful forum for developing space law. I was honored to be the chairman of the legal subcommittee, and I can assure you from my experience in this forum, the member states, now there are almost 80, are really committed in working on space law and working on space law for the future. So this is, let's say, to close the positive aspects. Now you can also expect from me, and you, Thorsten, you know me, I'm very blunt and open with the problems and with the challenges. Now, let's pick a few of them, and I'm sure there will be a number of reactions and questions on that, and I will be happy to very open and frankly respond to that. The first one is to maintain outer space for peaceful uses. I'm not talking about military uses, I'm talking about peaceful uses. And this is something which is of great concern to us and to the international community as a whole, how to maintain peaceful uses of outer space. The second one is, and this is all over in the press, I would say, and it's also something which is highlighted in many fora, and this is that we have to provide a sound regulatory framework for commercial and private uses of outer space. So we have to make space commerce, private space activities possible, but we also have to frame it. And there, one point is particularly important, and since I'm also representing an association of space lawyers from all over the world, from the north, from the south, from all societies, this point which I now make is really, really dear and important to many, many people. And this is that we have to maintain the principle that space is a province of all mankind. It's not only the few which can grab, it is something, space is something for the whole of humanity, and everybody should benefit from that. This is a principle enshrined in the Outer Space Treaty, and we have to take it seriously. Two more points. One is rather obvious. We have to deal with the growing amount of space debris. Space debris is now slowly getting to a point where it's seriously hindering operations in near Earth orbit in particular, but also on the GSO. And there is another issue which is more, let's say, international diplomatic, and this is about guaranteeing the coherence of space law making, because we see, besides UN Corpus, a number of international forums which deal with space law and which establish space law, like, for example, the ITU, the International Telecommunication Union, but also in disarmament contexts, where we have to be very careful that there are not diverging developments of space law. And this is also true for the national level. National space legislation is getting broader and broader, but it also means that we have to be careful to make it coherent. Now, these are the challenges, and that brings me to a few points simply to engage also a discussion on the future of space law. What do we need? Where are the key issues? What are the challenges, and where do we have to work on? Work on all levels, be it international, be it national, be it also societal. And what we are doing here today, the Space Café, it's also a kind of civil society movement for space, and this is important, and this is something which will be and can be heard, and which really has to make a bit of noise also, so that it can grow up into the international negotiations even. So number one is that we have to provide transparency and confidence building. You mentioned already the issue of security in outer space. I also touched it with the peaceful uses. What is really needed is that we take care of providing transparency and confidence building amongst the states. The second point is that so far, space law has been dealing with the status of outer space and the status of the actors in outer space, and we have to jump a threshold, which is that we have to regulate the behavior in outer space. And there is one keyword for that, it's space traffic management. We have to regulate space traffic as behavior in outer space. And the last point I would like to make is that we have to provide a fair and reasonable regulatory framework for the global space economy, which is something which will then also engage more and more states and private enterprises to go to space and to benefit or create benefits in outer space. A last word, this is more or less also the motto of IISL as the Association for the Space Lawyers. This is that we have to maintain the rule of law in outer space. And this is not trivial. Maintaining the rule of law is also discipline. It's also putting your own short-term interests behind and to care for the common good. So with these words, I wanted to introduce briefly the topic and provide a few hints on where we could discuss and exchange. Thank you.
Wow, thank you very much. And I mean, you've been very disciplined with the timing. I'm grateful for that. So let's start. I mean, it's a super complex area, as we all know, and we see it from the amount of questions we get in here, that it's very interesting for people to know more about it. So space as a global commons, you picked up on that earlier from the Outer Space Treaty, or where does space begins? So the province of all mankind. When do we, the definitions in policies and law, when will we get them? Because that's one of the big issues at the moment. I see that the definition of, not definition, the interpretation of these terms leads to different ways how to go into the future, especially in the commercial future. How do you see that?
Well, you might be shocked, also the listeners might be shocked to hear from somebody dealing with space law to say that it's not our priority to come up with definitions. We have been working and successfully working without definitions, with pragmatic approaches, but based on solid legal principles, where we did not foreclose a number of activities and areas which would have been closed if we had made prematurely definitions. We have the basic principles in outer space working, which is, for example, or in particular, the state responsibility, the state liability, and also the need for authorization by states of private activities. But we have not been necessarily needing the delimitation of outer space. And this did not make any problems up to now. So while we of course, have to keep in mind what to do and how to do things. We should focus primarily on conceptualizing now the issues I have been bringing up, in particular space traffic management, the way of regulating behavior in outer space. That's the prime task we have to come to.
Picking up on the STM as framework for the future, how do you see Europe's role in that? Because at the moment it's clearly led by the US.
Yes, absolutely. The US is in the front with that. They have come up already with scoping and framing the issue with also detailed ideas of how to handle that. We have an agenda item for 4 years now in the legal subcommittee of UN COPUOS, where every country can bring in its ideas and its concepts for space traffic management. And in fact, space traffic management can only work if it's accepted or its rules and regulations are accepted globally. So the legal subcommittee will be the place to discuss and to converge on a concept which is acceptable to everybody. So Europe has to bring in their ideas and concepts as all the other activities and the partners and members of the legal subcommittee are invited to do the same. We so far do not have a lot of intergovernmental discussions on space traffic management, but we have to see that this concept is rather young, made a rather quick career, and now the governments are slowly shaping their concepts for space traffic management, and they will bring it into the global forum for a discussion, and then hopefully converging to one single setup.
Okay. Let's go into a bit more concrete, we have a number of questions already on that, on the Artemis Accords of the US. I mean, it's a very current. So, what is your view, your personal view on the Artemis Accords initiative, and then leading over to, is it something that Europe should develop a joint position on, or should it be an individual national decision?
Well, the Artemis Accords, we know them primarily through press releases. There are a few ideas which have been floated by NASA, but we have not had any deeper or concrete exchange on the governmental level on them. So it's difficult to judge what they actually will contain and where they will actually lead. Will they be only for the partners in the gateway? Will they be for everybody? This is a bit unclear, and we have to see how the US government is bringing them in a formal way into the international discussions. What is absolutely clear is that we should not have a system on how to deal with activities on the moon's surface, which is characterized by bilateral agreements between the US and I don't know how many states. This cannot be the structure of a, let's say, regime which will deal with how to handle activities on the moon's surface. This has to be negotiated amongst equal states and it has to be negotiated in the forum which is set out for that, and this is the legal subcommittee of the UN Corpus. And there we will have to build on discussions which are related to the application of the Moon Agreement, which is growing its number of signatories and parties, and where we also have to see what the basic idea of the principles enshrined in the Outer Space Treaty, in particular Article 2, the non-appropriation, is maintained, and how it will be handled. So it is an initiative. It is an initiative by a very important actor, but the discussion on it, a kind of serious binding discussion on it, can only be done in a global forum.
Wow. Okay. But we see these facts. I mean, these global discussions are, and I'm a big supporter of the UN and the UN activities, and you know that. But I mean, when we see the reality at the moment, we see states, one state, US, moving forward in a speed that the global community cannot cope with, and move so far ahead and set facts. So again, I mean, you said we need this global context, so you don't even look at the European role. On the other hand, the Moon Agreement, and I mean, more and more countries are leaving the Moon Agreement, the Moon Treaty. And do you see that as the future, and how to move on with that?
Well, I return to my optimistic element. We have been working on space law in the global community quite successfully for 50 years. And again, what we have been working on and what has been established is rather stable, and the states respect that. Now, why should we simply abandon that in a situation where one state might be ahead? But I don't see that. Look around, how many states already have moon probes? So the number is growing, and we have a stronger and stronger community eyeing the moon. So simply this would make it even more important to look at a forum where different or differing views and positions can be discussed. And this is, and we have only one, the Global Forum of UN Corporate. And let me also return to the issue of the global commons, or the common heritage of mankind, or as it is put in the Outer Space Treaty, the province of all mankind. Well, we have three global commons: the deep seabed, outer space, and Antarctica. They are all under pressure. They are principles of non-appropriation, of peaceful uses, of protection of the environment. They are, you can call it, under stress. And why should we give in? Why should we abandon this concept, which is really fantastic? It shall provide a fair distribution. It shall provide benefits for everybody, and not simply first come, first served, and the winner takes it all. We should work on maintaining these principles. We should even enlarge them. Look at around the environmental issue, human beings, animals, the nature. It's all under severe stress. We all know what we should do, but we don't do it. If we look how the global commons are organized, this is a fantastic example of how we should deal with all these problems we have around and for mankind's action. But we are doing here, again, exactly the contrary. We try to do away with the principles of the global commons instead of enlarging them. And this is, well, here we are in civil society. This is something where civil society can also make a stand and can raise its voice.
Okay, I get this point. Even so, I can't share this optimism. I mean, as much as I support the UN and their principles, I can't see this consensus or ruled body making progress in the principles, the laws, the activities, or especially in outer space. I mean, we have a number of questions that are pointing back to the bipolar world that we are coming from, and now we have a multipolar world and a number of different actors that are very, very hard to harmonize. But we leave it. I mean, we try to stay in the 33 minutes, and I know that was a topic that is so huge that we can fill an evening with that. Taking a few questions on the European side. End of last year, we had this 14.4 billion euro budget approved by the either member states. With the crisis now, are using a lot of this of money that is needed to reboot the European economics. Taxes will go down, budgets will shrink. So will we see an issue for government-supported space activities via ether or the national programs? And will that leave the space market exclusively to the billionaires? And if so, what is the point of policy here?
Well, hopefully not. The government spending on space is giving a big return. And I think that politicians have carefully noted how useful space has been and is and will even more become in managing the corona crisis. Just look at what Galileo can be doing for, in particular, channeling the traffic and making transporter freight be possible and be more easily done. There are so many examples how space applications helped in the corona crisis that, as I say, politicians are really attentive to that. On the other hand, you also should see that the European space industry is top class in a lot of areas, and that its commercial activities are really large and growing. And we have been working on a number of avenues on how to further improve and increase that and also stabilize that. So I'm rather confident that after the crisis, space, which hasn't been suffering much and also did not stop working because it's necessary, all the applications are daily necessary, that it will recover rather quickly and that it will continue on the path it has been taken in CV for the ESA programs. And I'm also confident that in the course of this year, we will also establish a very strong EU space program, which will go from 2020 to 2027. So for that, I'm quite optimistic.
Okay. Let's have a look into the next half year when Germany is taking over the EU presidency or in a month, and you have been actively involved in that. What can we expect in terms of space harmonization, space security during the 6 months? Can you give us an outlook? What is on the horizon?
Well, there will be two, let's say, pillars which we will be building on. The first one is to practically manage the space activities for the upcoming 7 years. So we have to define the budget. We have to define the regulatory framework, which is enshrined in the regulation, which shall be adopted soon. And we will have to deal with the relations between the EU and other bodies. This is number one, and this is also all encompassing the recovery from the corona crisis. So additional activities and additional actions. And then there will be a second element, a second pillar, where we will be making, let's say, a special German touch on the presidency. And this is that we want to shape the key principles for the global space economy. And this means that we would like to work together with the member states and the institutions, ESA and EC, and the bodies of the EU, on what positions Europe should take when it comes to the question of how to encourage global space economies. What kind of regulatory mechanisms, also what kind of market developments we should establish in order to benefit not only the industry, but also the whole commercial sector, and in the end, of course, the citizens. These are the two pillars we will have to work on, and I'm pretty sure that the other member states, we also have a trio together with Portugal and Slovenia, which will be following us, and the institutions ESA and EC will buy in, and we together will then develop our positions, which shall be for the benefit of the space sector and for the citizen.
Okay, great. Exciting future are ahead. One question that brings me back what happened yesterday with the Virgin Orbit's air launch attempt. It seems for Germany and for Europe, air launch could be a feasible opportunity. I mean, as there was the calls for the spaceport Germany and so on and so forth, but it's also on a European level. So will we see that in the European or the German legislation as a possible access to space for us from mainland or the islands, ex-Europe?
Well, we have a number of spaceport projects in Europe, and this is good because it shows there is an interest by governments, and it's an interest by commercial entities, that they have confidence that there will be a market and that there will be a big extension of space activities. So providing space launch services is obviously a field where there is a rather big interest and confidence in the commercial market. So the European states where this happens are encouraging that, UK in particular, but also Portugal, Spain, several others. And we do think that this is something where we now have to see how the market forces will also develop. The regulatory framework has to be established on the national level, and we also see that the respective governments are carefully working on that. So from this perspective, I think this certainly has a future. It will depend, of course, on the number of satellites to be launched, and this also depends on the economic development and recovery. But I think there will be a few even to be successful, and we will see a number of spaceports in Europe in the decades to come.
That's great. You didn't mention Germany here. I listened carefully. However, so as we have this format as a 33-minute format, and we are a few minutes over, so I'm afraid we have to come to an end. Or even so, I would really enjoy continuing this exciting talk with you. But be sure we will follow up on space security, space policy, space law, on our Space Café web talks and in our magazine. So there's also really a number of, I think I'm counting here 44 questions, or a few of them are long as a book. So we will select them, send them over to you with the request for an answer. So our next webinars are, for those of you that might attend, on the 2nd of June, I call Dr. Raji Rajagopalan from the Observer Research Foundation India my guest, and Raji will give us a briefing on the national space dynamics in India's space program. And Kai-Uwe, would you listen to this talk? What do you think? Is that an interesting one?
Well, it's in my calendar, 2nd June, 4 o'clock. I will be there.
Great, that's the day after Pentecost, so that's cool. So on 9th of June, I will have Yvette Gonzalez as my guest, and Yvette will tell us about what POSSUM is and explain how citizen or science research can save the world. It would be an interesting one as well. And here, as a first announcement, on the 16th of June, I will experiment something new. I mean, I'm not that brave, but this time I'm asked to do so. 2 guests in my web talk. So Dr. Regina Pelzus and Mark Becker from the DLR Space Management will discuss with me space, a dual-use future. And there's no exclamation mark or question mark behind it. So I think that will pick up a few of the topics we discussed today. Do you think dual use is a potential future for us in space?
You ask me, Thorsten?
Yep, because the audience can't answer.
Of course, it is the present, and it will be the future. We also have the term of secularization of outer space. It will be interesting, and I will ask that question certainly to Regina and to Mark. So I will also be there and listen very carefully. It's highly relevant and important.
I can tell you that Regina is nervous already. So, however, we will build on that. Regards to you listening. So all events are online on Eventbrite as usual. And as always, we would like to hear your feedback. So please check in with us on Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Don't forget to sign up to our daily or our bi-weekly newsletters. And we really need your support. Also, as potential sponsors of these web talks here, please get in touch with us if you can. Thank you all very much for your interest today, and thank you, Kai-Uwe, for this exciting talk and being my guest. And thanks again to my entire team behind the scenes for doing the great job week by week again. Tomorrow, if weather and technology permits, will be the launch day for a new era. And so my greetings and good luck to SpaceX to make it. I hope all of you will stay safe and stay healthy. Thanks for joining us. I hope to see you next week. And in the meantime, visit our website and follow us on social media. Thank you very much and have a great day. Bye-bye.